Suffolk, England. In 1939, Basil Brown, a self-taught archaeologist, arrives at Edith Pretty's enormous estate. She tasked him with exploring and digging the estate's burial grounds, which contain enormous mounds. Edith offers him the same income he earns at his museum work, but he declines, claiming it is not enough. He meets Edith's small son, Robert, then leaves the property. As he rides away, he receives a new offer from Edith's chauffeur, who informs him that he will start on Monday. He believes the mound Edith wants to start with is unlikely to contain much, so he begins with the one he believes will be the most fruitful. Visitors from Brown's former employer, the Ipswich Museum, arrive to observe the excavation. They are unimpressed with this obviously unimportant project and urge Edith to return Mr. Brown to work on their new Roman villa. Brown believes the burial grounds are Anglo-Saxon, not Viking, as he initially assumed. Edith allows him to select which job he wants to take, and he chooses to continue working on the burial mound, despite his co-workers insisting that they match his new wage. Edith, meanwhile, is mourning her husband and one day finds herself in agony and out of breath while walking home. Her doctor advises her not to worry too much. One day, Edith and Brown are talking about archaeology when the dig site, which does not yet have supports, the trench collapses on him. Edith and everyone on the estate work together to dig him out, despite his serious injuries. Edith performs CPR, and Brown is finally recovered. After that, Edith asks him whether he saw anything while near death, and Brown answers he thought about his grandfather. He rushes back to the area, where he thinks he was mistaken about the mound Edith had initially chosen for him to excavate. Brown learns from others at the estate that Edith cared for her ailing father for 13 years, turning down her husband's proposal every year until her father died. A year after Robert's birth, her husband died as well. Meanwhile, Brown discovers iron rivets at the dig site, which is a clear sign of something enormous. He discovers a ship inside the mound, indicating that it is the burial location of a very significant figure, such as a warrior or king. Edith and Robert are astounded by what they are seeing, and Brown congratulates Edith on being correct about the mound, telling Robert that he couldn't have done it without him. With this discovery, the men from the Ipswich Museum return to take over the excavation, but Edith declines, leaving it to Mr. Brown. She knows he'll need more help, and since he turned down the museum personnel, she asks her cousin Rory Lomax to help. She praises him for allowing Robert to participate and invites him to join her for dinner. When he arrives at his rooms, he is surprised to meet his wife, May. She claims she told him she was bringing in her letters, none of which Brown had opened. Due to May is present, he spends the evening with her and is forced to cancel the dinner that Edith had prepared for him. Meanwhile, World War II is looming over the entire country. Edith discovers that she has irreversible heart damage as a result of a childhood rheumatic fever, and that a further attack, probably fatal, is imminent. Men from the National Museum arrive at the dig site despite Edith's wishes, determined to participate in the dig, which they now believe to be monumental. Charles Phillips informs Brown that this is a national interest dig, and that the National Museum will take over by order of the Ministry of Works, therefore Brown's services will no longer be required. Brown claims that he was hired by Edith, not them. Brown runs to tell Edith that there looks to be a burial chamber on the ship and asks what she wants to do. He pushes her to challenge them. Edith informs Phillips that she wants to keep Brown on board, and Phillips begins dictating to Brown his extremely specific and humiliating instructions, clearly beneath Brown's capabilities, preventing Brown and Rory from entering the ship. Phillips sees Brown as an amateur unfit for the project. Brown leaves, assuming he will not be given credit for the discovery, and says goodbye to Robert. Robert pursues him on his bike. May convinces him to return home, and Robert, to their surprise, returns and tells Brown what he promised. Edith and Rory arrive to pick up Robert, and Brown informs them that he will return to the dig. Stuart Piggott and his wife Peggy are brought in by Phillips for assistance. Peggy is unhappy to see that Phillips did not read her work and simply invited her to join the dig because she is light and can excavate the lightest areas. Later, Peggy walks through a section of the excavation site. Edith and she start talking, and when Peggy mentions that she doesn't have any appropriate clothes since they just returned from their vacation, Edith gives her some of hers. When rain causes the dig to miss a day's work, Edith warns Phillips that he is wasting Mr. Brown's abilities. He claims Brown is unqualified, but Edith responds it's just snobbery and that Phillips puts Brown to work. Stuart and Peggy's marriage looks strained, with Peggy attempting to have romantic moments with Stuart but Stuart constantly avoiding her. She leaves for the dig without him one morning, and he complains that he is running late. Stuart's secret homosexuality is revealed when he flirts with another man on the site. Peggy locates and discovers the first clearly Anglo-Saxon piece, while Brown discovers an ancient coin that proves what Brown believed from the start. Phillips wants to transport the artifacts to London, but Edith notices the looming war and instructs Brown to carry them to the house, confounding Phillips. Peggy and Rory start spending time together. Later, Stuart informs Peggy that he is taking some of the artifacts from the dig with the other man, and he awkwardly asks Peggy to stay and help with the dig. Edith then asks Peggy to stay at the house, where everyone hears Rory has been accepted for the Royal Air Force. Public interest in the ship grows, and Edith invites the public to observe the discovery, which frustrates Phillips. Right then, an Air Force jet crashes into the nearby water. Edith warns everyone not to swim since the current is so strong, but Rory goes into the sea and pulls the pilot from the debris, but he does not survive. Peggy and Rory share a near kiss, but Peggy resists. Meanwhile, Robert asks Edith if Rory will die like the pilot. When Peggy returns home, she discovers Edith suffering a medical episode. Robert discovers and runs off into the night, upset, only to run into Brown. Robert sobs to Brown that he is failing to care for his mother and does not understand why he cannot help her. Brown tells Robert to be tough and takes him inside. Meanwhile, Phillips wonders who will keep the artifacts discovered at the site. Rory receives his orders to report, and Edith informs him that he cannot die because Robert will need him. Stuart returns with flowers for Peggy and meets Rory, then Peggy, who realizes Rory has been called to war. Many people come out to see the discovery, and there is a celebration party at the estate. Edith joyfully informs the assembled crowd that Brown is responsible for the discovery. The investigation into the artifacts concludes that Edith is the rightful owner of all of the artifacts, and she begins to cry. Brown expected her to be happy, but Edith regretfully states that they all die and decay. Brown claims they are all part of something that lives on. Peggy tears up as she looks at Rory's photos of the dig, and Edith calms her. Phillips inquires about Edith's intentions for the treasure as various museums compete for the artifacts, and he wonders how much she will ask for them. Edith asks May whether Robert can visit the Browns on occasion, and she agrees. Peggy informs Stuart that he is unhappy with her and ends their relationship. Edith informs Brown that she is leaving the treasure to the British Museum as a gift. As a condition of the donation, she demands that Brown's work be properly acknowledged. Peggy throws away her wedding ring and goes to Rory's campsite, where she finds him and they sleep together. Stuart is implied to be pursuing his own romance with his male colleague. On the night before the dig site is to be filled, Robert, Edith, and Brown sleep under the stars. Shortly thereafter, war is officially declared. Later, Robert stands alone and waves farewell to Brown. According to the postscript, the treasure was safely stored underground during the war and was shown to the public 9 years after Edith died. Basil Brown's name was not acknowledged. Only in recent years has Brown's true contribution been recognized, with his name listed alongside Edith's in the museum's permanent collection.